FIFA has finally taken action against Argentina following the chaos that erupted after the World Cup final. And this time, the players did not simply walk away from the controversy. At the center of the storm is Leandro Paredes. He is facing 3 separate assault charges from FIFA over his alleged conduct following the final. And if those charges are upheld, the punishment could be serious enough to keep him out of a significant number of Argentina's next competitive matches. But here is where this story gets even more complicated. Because while FIFA was already investigating Paredes, while his disciplinary case was still sitting on the table, he returned to club football and quickly found himself involved in another heated incident. And suddenly, this is no longer just about one emotional moment after a World Cup final. It is about a pattern. So, what exactly happened? How serious could FIFA's punishment be? And why does Paredes keep finding himself at the center of football's biggest confrontations? Let's go back to the beginning. The World Cup final was supposed to be the biggest moment of Argentina's campaign. Instead, the ending became one of the most controversial scenes of the tournament. Spain defeated Argentina 1-0 after extra time to become world champions. As Spain's players celebrated, tensions exploded between the two teams. According to the disciplinary allegations outlined in the source material, Paredes was accused of aggressive conduct toward Eric Garcia, while another incident involved Gavi being knocked to the ground. Nahuel Molina was also accused of aggressive behavior toward Rodri, and the controversy did not stop with the players. Argentina assistant coach Roberto Ayala was also accused of involvement in the confrontation. Think about that for a moment. This was the World Cup final, the biggest stage in international football. Millions of fans were watching around the world, and instead of the final whistle simply marking the end of the tournament, the celebrations were overshadowed by a confrontation involving players and staff. FIFA responded by opening a disciplinary investigation. Officials reviewed the referee's report and available footage before charges were filed. And that is where Paredes found himself in the most dangerous position. According to the source, FIFA brought 3 separate assault charges against him. That distinction matters. This was not simply one general accusation that he was involved in a confrontation. The charges were listed separately. Under FIFA's disciplinary framework, an assault offense can carry a minimum 3-match suspension. So, if all 3 charges were ultimately upheld at the minimum level described in the source, Paredes could potentially face a 9-match suspension. That would be a huge punishment. And it could potentially affect meaningful competitive matches rather than simply disappearing during a few friendlies. Other Argentina figures were also charged. Molina faced 2 assault-related charges along with an unsporting behavior charge. Ayala was charged with assault, while Thiago Almada faced an unsporting behavior charge. Even Gavi, who was involved on the Spanish side of the incident, appeared in the disciplinary proceedings for unsporting behavior. That detail is important because it shows how complicated the situation became. This was not simply FIFA targeting one side. The governing body opened multiple cases connected to the incidents surrounding the final. And Argentina's Football Federation was facing its own disciplinary problems. The source also describes investigations involving alleged discriminatory chants, objects thrown by spectators, and a political banner connected to the Falkland Islands issue. So, when you put everything together, this became much bigger than one player losing his temper. There were multiple individual cases and additional disciplinary proceedings involving the federation itself. And the consequences for Argentina could go beyond individual suspensions. If the federation-related charges were upheld, the source indicates that Argentina could potentially face significant financial penalties and even stadium restrictions for future home matches. Imagine Argentina playing a major international game in front of partially empty stands. For a football nation known for its incredible atmosphere and passionate supporters, that would be a major punishment. But there is another detail that makes Paredes' situation especially important. Any suspension would have to be served during Argentina's relevant official competitive matches. That means the timing of FIFA's final decision could become extremely important. Depending on the length of the suspension and Argentina's upcoming schedule, Paredes could potentially miss meaningful tournament football. However, there is one thing that needs to be made absolutely clear. Paredes has not been found guilty simply because FIFA filed charges. These are allegations. The disciplinary process still has to take place, and Paredes has the right to present his side of the story. That distinction is critical. In fact, the source points out that there was already confusion surrounding the disciplinary process when a red card briefly appeared next to Paredes' name in FIFA's official records. FIFA later described that as an administrative error and removed it. So, at this stage, the final punishment has not been decided. But while FIFA was considering what to do next, Paredes returned to club football. And that is where the story took another turn. Because if the disciplinary committee was looking for evidence that the World Cup incident was simply a one-time emotional reaction, Paredes' next few matches were not exactly helpful. He returned to Boca Juniors. And once again, he became involved in a heated confrontation. Boca were playing Newell's Old Boys in a 2-2 match. During the closing stages, a Newell's player went down after a challenge. According to the source, Paredes then struck the loose ball toward the player, triggering another confrontation. Players surrounded him. His teammates had to intervene. The referee showed him a yellow card. And suddenly, the same questions were back. Was the World Cup final simply an isolated moment? Or was something bigger going on? The situation became even more dramatic around the corner kick incident, where police reportedly had to form a protective barrier around Paredes because of the hostility coming from the stands. That image alone tells you how intense the situation had become. This was not happening in a World Cup final anymore. This was club football. And Paredes was still at the center of the storm. For FIFA, the timing could hardly have been worse. Imagine being investigated for aggressive conduct and then immediately returning to the field and becoming involved in another heated incident. That does not prove guilt in the original case. But it certainly makes the conversation much louder. And this is exactly why Paredes has become one of the most talked about players in Argentina's disciplinary story. Because the controversy did not begin in 2026. There is another chapter. And it takes us back to the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. Argentina faced the Netherlands in a quarterfinal that became one of the most heated matches of that tournament. The match reportedly produced a record number of yellow cards. And Paredes once again found himself at the center of the confrontation. The source describes an incident involving him sending the ball toward the Dutch bench, which helped trigger a major confrontation. Different tournament. Different opponent. Different year. But the same player was once again involved in one of football's biggest moments of tension. And that is what makes the current FIFA case so fascinating. Because the argument is no longer only about what happened after one World Cup final. It is about whether FIFA sees the latest incident as an isolated emotional reaction, or as part of a repeated pattern of disciplinary problems. And that could make all the difference. Because Paredes is not an unknown player. He is an important figure for Argentina and a prominent member of Boca Juniors. When a player at that level becomes the face of a controversy, the story becomes much bigger than one yellow card or one confrontation. It becomes about reputation. It becomes about responsibility. And it becomes about how football's governing body wants to respond when the entire world is watching. But there is another side to this story. And before anyone decides that Paredes should receive the harshest possible punishment, there is an important point that must be considered. He has not been convicted. He has not received a final FIFA suspension. And the emotions surrounding a World Cup final are unlike almost anything else in sport. Argentina had just lost the biggest match imaginable. The pressure was enormous. The disappointment was immediate. And confrontations after major sporting events can involve multiple people and complicated circumstances. The source also notes that a Spanish player was charged in connection with the wider incident. So, there is a legitimate argument that the entire situation needs to be judged fairly rather than turning Paredes into a villain before FIFA has reached its decision. And that brings us to the biggest question of all. What will FIFA actually do? Because whatever happens next could affect Paredes, Argentina, and the way this entire World Cup controversy is remembered. Here is where the situation surrounding Leandro Paredes becomes much more serious. If FIFA decides that the World Cup final incident was simply an emotional reaction, Paredes could have an argument. But if the disciplinary committee looks at everything together, the World Cup final, the previous controversy in Qatar, and the incident after his return to Boca Juniors, the picture becomes much harder to ignore. Because FIFA does not have to look at every moment in isolation. The bigger question is whether the latest controversy represents a one-time loss of control or part of an established pattern. And that is exactly what makes the timing of Paredes' return to club football so important. While his FIFA case was still open, he had an opportunity to stay completely out of trouble. Keep his head down. Let the process play out. And show that what happened after the World Cup final would not happen again. Instead, another heated incident quickly became part of the conversation. Again, that does not automatically prove the FIFA allegations. But from a public relations standpoint, it is almost the worst possible timing. The disciplinary committee will ultimately make its own decision based on the evidence and applicable rules. But outside the committee room, the debate has already exploded. Paredes has been labeled one of the most controversial figures in Argentine football, and the footage from his various confrontations continues to circulate across social media. That is one reason this story refuses to disappear. Most football controversies have a short life. A dramatic moment happens. Fans argue about it. Pundits debate it. Then another match comes along and everyone moves on. But this story keeps getting new chapters. Every time the conversation starts to cool down, another clip appears. Another reaction comes in. Another debate begins. And suddenly Paredes is back in the headlines. The source also notes that former officials and media personalities have called for serious disciplinary action. One former refereeing chief, Keith Hackett, reportedly argued that Paredes deserved a 10-match suspension and criticized the handling of the situation. That kind of criticism shows just how far the debate has gone. But FIFA has also shown in previous cases that it can impose extremely serious punishments when it believes football's disciplinary standards have been crossed. One famous example is Luis Suarez. After his World Cup incident, FIFA did not limit the punishment to a short suspension from international matches. His ban also affected his involvement in football more broadly. Then there was the case involving Luis Rubiales, who received a multi-year FIFA ban following the controversy surrounding the Women's World Cup. The lesson is simple. When FIFA decides that an incident has crossed a serious line, it can impose career-changing consequences. So, could Paredes face something similar? That is where we have to slow down. Nobody knows the final punishment yet. Anyone claiming that FIFA has already decided on a specific suspension is getting ahead of the facts. The disciplinary process still matters. The evidence matters. Paredes' response matters. And the final decision belongs to FIFA's disciplinary authorities. There is also a strong argument for giving Paredes a fair hearing. The atmosphere after a World Cup final is extraordinary. Players spend years preparing for that moment. One team becomes world champion. The other experiences one of the most painful defeats imaginable.